What's going on, everyone? This is Sherry, and you are tuned into She Said What She Said, the podcast where we interview badass women in the sports world and beyond. And I am super excited to be closing out our season before we go on summer break with one of my favorite topics of all time. I already got like a book next to me that I'm currently reading about the topic. We already talked about stop share. We can't have the whole show before we go on the air to get everything started. But before I give any spoilers out or anything like that, let me bring in it's no longer the month of May, so I actually don't have a good way to do the Harimi, just that I did some laches last night. So let's bring in Faye. Hey.
Hey,
Hey, how are
what's
you?
up? I am wonderful. How are you?
I am fantastic. It is June. It is a
Oh,
beautiful day.
you guys don't
Um,
have cicadas in the city.
Not yet, baby. Not yet. I feel
Oh,
like I
I
we
feel
always
like
get
you
them.
guys
So
aren't getting them. They're not
we
coming
always
to you guys.
we always get them around middle of June. So
Like the normal ones, like the yearly ones, but you don't have these like
we
big
got this
red-eyed.
we got the 17-years the other year. So I don't want to chance it. So when people are like, oh, I'm in the city, I'm like, yeah, I'm not.
That's true. Maybe you don't. Maybe for you guys, they're taking a little longer because of all the
It might take
construction
a
and
take
stuff.
a little. Yes, the construction. They don't like that construction.
No.
Um, so you have an announcement that you wanted to.
I Yes, before we start
Yes.
with this amazing guest of ours. So,
Mm-hmm.
everyone, I am doing a thing, and it's for this gym fitness facility I've been a part of called Hot Works for years. They do infrared sauna workouts, which one day I'd love to have someone on that talks about all the amazing benefits of infrared because it changed my life, especially with my ACL injury
Mm-hmm.
last year. However, that's a competition. I'm actually in competing to be a virtual instructor. So it's a similar to Peloton where you go online and you see your virtual instructor with each infrared sauna has their own virtual instructor. And there's 7 of us. So right now I made the top 40. So that's the first round. Now we're
Mm-hmm.
doing this voting round to get to the top 15. We get sent to Nashville in July. And then we compete live they have like a summit, like a whole weekend thing with all the people that are own the different franchises and stuff. And then they all vote on the top 7 out of the 15 to become next year's virtual instructors. So yeah, link is here. I'm going to put a post on the She Said What She Said,
Mm-hmm. How
our
often can I
different.
vote?
So, okay, so the voting goes like this. It's $1 every vote. And the voting, and
Okay.
it goes to this place called Sacred Mountain Retreat Center, which is a retreat center for first responders and veterans. And Hotworks has a couple infrared saunas that they've donated. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is a place like we go to. I kind of think of it like it's the Mirrorball, and it's a free service for them. And I don't know. I get that a lot of these like voting things can kind of be like, oh, it's $1, but you can vote every day. You can vote $1 a day. I'm noticing that like I think people might think that they need to put in a lot of money at once or whatever. But even if you could do $1, like the numbers, the amount of money is great, but it's really I think too the amount of supporters as well. So it's kind of a dual
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. There's some of the women that have whatever amount of money, but they've got like 60 supporters. So even if those people only voted $1, that is perfect. So it goes to an awesome cause. It helps me out to get me to that top 15 because it's a weighted choice by the end of June, and it goes throughout the month of June. So yeah. So that's the first news.
Yes.
So thank you all for the support, and I've been surprised about how many people have come out of the woodworks to support. So it feels really good. And then, so speaking of kind of what I was talking about before about how this has helped me with my ACL injury. Um, so I've had a few different injuries. ACL. Tonight's fantastic guest, Sue Walsh, I met through my ex at DePaul. She is the Senior Associate Athletics Director for Sports Medicine there. And that is her title, which sounds great. But this woman, as Coach Dopek would tell you, is a genius in her field. She's not only, she not only does that, but she's traveled abroad to study things that we don't do here in the US because it's not like normal shit, right? It's out of the box thinking on how to manipulate the body, how things work, everything. So I'm excited to have her here to talk about, because it's summer, we've got kids in sports, our daughters, our sons, whatever. We're doing races ourselves. Yeah. We are getting ready for doing competitions and runs, and even just like going swimming or like starting to get more active because we've been kind of dormant for the winter. So but without further ado, let's bring on Sue Walsh.
Hi. Hello, Sue.
Hello.
Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. That was a great introduction. I'm not sure I deserve it, but it's a great introduction.
Of course you do. You got me.
You do.
Yeah, you got me into. I had ruptured my Achilles about in like 2011 or 2009 or 2010, and I remember Dave calling the athletic department at DePaul and was like, "Yeah, so my girlfriend ruptured her Achilles, and I was in Rush having my surgery 3 days later." So yeah, I love you guys. You guys are great.
Yeah, we had to get that thing repaired.
Yes. And I've heard DePaul's had a few Achilles ruptures over the years.
Yeah, they're rough. Achilles, it's rough. Getting that strength back for
yeah.
And
then doing it right, because I've noticed, on the same side I had ACL meniscus, and the same side I ruptured my hip tendon. So there's a lot to be said about that, whatever that's called, like all that in the chain. Yes.
That's what I tell, when I teach some classes at Ultimate Ninjas on Saturdays. And that's one thing I say, like, hey guys, remember the hip bone's connected to the leg bone, but it's a song, but like everything. Yeah. Cause like this goes out, and then what's overcompensating for that? And then that goes out, and then you get it better, but is it 100% better? Is there some muscle atrophy?
Yeah, atrophy.
Like, what's that word? From there. And so it is like incredible on the human body, and just all these like little things where people are like, oh, I have all this knee pain. It's not your knee. It's coming from your hips, right? This muscle is doing this. A big thing that, in the world of sprinting was hip flexors, not a strong enough core. All these little things. And Sue's like, duh. But, it's just incredible of how much we as normal people don't necessarily know about that, like how much this knowledge is not necessarily shared.
And we let things go.
World. Yeah. We let
it's just go. Like, it was kind of this, like, it tweaked a little bit. So, but I'm going to be fine. I'm going to work through it. And I'm like, honey, you're like 30 something years old. You are not, it's not a tweak at this point. And usually when you're younger, it's not a tweak either. It's something happened. Your body doesn't normally feel like that. So take care of it right away.
Yeah. And, just actually in 2023, they put together a consortium to study women's physiology based on the menstrual cycle through the reproductive years. And it's across 7 different countries. Wow. And it's quality research on women. And we right now know very little. There's very little good research on women, and they're studying elite athletes, and that will translate. But we're a little, like a lot of the information, we're a little bit behind on knowing with women, like how we are impacted during, our childbirth years. And how we should train people different, and manage people's training loads, and which is a huge part of one of the reasons you can't train a woman like a man. And now we have all these monitoring tools, Catapult, and you can, I mean, the technology is helped us so much because it's strength, it's motor control, it's well-being, it's everything, right? And when we'll never know it all, but I think having better research in regards to women, because there's a lot of misinformation out there and we really don't have the answers totally yet. So I'm excited to see what comes out from this consortium in the next 10 years.
Right.
Yeah. And FIFA's doing a project for women. And I don't know if you guys keep up with, but just this past year is the first time in history women have hit the $1 billion mark with like sports.
Yeah.
Because that's part of it, right? Is having access to these things. Like, it's hard for women to get the same access to resources. And I mean, we see it's getting better, but the Me Too sometimes drops off. And so we're trying to keep that going on the women's side. Thank God for Title IX, because it evened the playing ground for resources that women get. And so, not to get too political here, but that's what allows us to train women the way they should be trained, and not train. So there's some research, of course, we can extrapolate from men to women, but there's a lot that doesn't fit. And one of the things when you emailed me and said, through the life cycle, because that women that now are playing sports, it's much different for them than women that, played it 20 years ago. Yeah. And I think one of the things is the injuries that, we didn't know about. We didn't know how to train people right and even bring people back. I mean, now what we do with ACLs, like we don't let people, there's no accelerated ACL protocols, 9 months at the very earliest, and we do way more testing to make sure that quad is strong, and that it stays strong. It's when you have underlying pathology, you said, the kinetic chain on that side. Well, if you start like the gastroc, it's in soleus, it's such an important muscle in any sport, And it's funny because when there's ever an uptick, especially like in elite sports and a certain kind of injury, the research comes tumbling in, and you learn a lot about a muscle group. And but the calf, like for running, in jumping and change of directions is enormously important. It's like probably 60% of our force acceleration comes from the calf. And so for someone that doesn't have that calf strength, they have to get it somewhere else. They have to compensate, right?
It's like I would say, we think about like the calf, we think about basketball, we think about these but let me tell you, the triple jump in track has got to be the most intensive thing I can think of for an Achilles. Because, I one of my best friends, he was like one of the top, triple jumpers. Then he started getting Achilles issues because you're jumping on one leg, you're doing a full bound, you're landing on it again. Like, who came up with this event?
It is.
I always say that. Who thought of this?
Yes.
Everything else in track kind of makes sense. But then you get to the triple jump. But, you look at in a sport like that, and it's like, especially, as a college athlete, you only have so much eligibility, right? As a professional, you only have so much in your prime. So when you get an injury like that, and you definitely will always have, coaches that might want you back competing, and you want to get back to competing. So there's such a fine line of like, when do you sit? How do you rehab it? I had some issues with Achilles tendonitis myself my senior year, and I mean, it just mentally was the biggest. Like when that thing like flared up, it took me out because I just can't. It's like your Achilles hurts. Okay, go sprint. What?
Yeah.
You just want to do it. So like, how, as the director of sports medicine, how do you kind of balance that thing of an athlete wanting to get back out there, maybe downplaying their symptoms, which is coach of pushing that, how do you kind of intervene or what do you do?
Over the years, I've worked a lot with track because,
We're the best. Sorry.
such a large team.
Yes.
And it's so many different events.
Right.
It's like
20 different body types.
Yes, and it's too much for one person.
Yep.
Right.
And I've also learned a lot from Dave about mechanics and different things like that. So, but one of the things is, in sport, in college, first of all, they're young, so it's a little bit easier. The younger you are, you
Bounce back.
Yes, way easier. And you don't have as much underlying pathology. So the more surgeries and injuries that people have over the years, that impacts that muscle function. Those are the people that need longer warm-ups, and they need to always lift weights and keep strong and all those good things. But one of the most important things is if somebody's totally out, they're going to need a surgery. That's it. The season's kind of
yeah.
But if they're not, we still have to keep them fit, because if they get too unfit, then you can't just, especially in track, like if you're not fit, that's the nature of the sport. It's max efforts, right? And so you have to figure out a way, if they're still going to do it, where they're modified, and we'll use an Alter G, but that we're measuring everything. We're looking at their strength to see what deficit. We're looking at their control, like what's causing this. And then we're trying to have them cross train, whatever we can think of, that they can still tolerate, so that they don't, because the clock is ticking with all these athletes. I don't pull kids. We might have to modify them or have them do something a little bit different. And obviously different, like sprinters, either sprint or you don't, right? Because jogging is not training for sprinting, right?
Nope.
But the farther they get out of it, you have like 7 to 10 days before those qualities start to deteriorate. And so I think that that in college athletics, because the seasons are so short, is what we battle, is the longer somebody's out. And that's the biggest mistake people make, even with sickness. Sometimes kids get sick and they're out for 3 or 4 days, and then the coach thinks, well, they're just going to jump back in where they left off. And then the kid either has like another injury or
again.
It's like dehydration. All the nutrition was off.
Right. We have a comment coming in. Sometimes the mental part is what stops you more than the physical, not being able to do it. That's so true, because sometimes too, like it's the fear of thinking about it. So take my last ankle sprain. I did it doing a lache and ninja, but I landed didn't put the mats in the right spot. Last night, I was like, I'm going to do laches, but I'm just going to practice swinging, propelling, and landing, right? Because that's what scares me the most. And I did some baby ones, felt fine. The first time I took a full backswing, totally bailed. I was like, oh, shit. But I was like, we just have to keep doing it. By the end of the night, I was good. But it's like, you cannot do these sports with fear. Because once you have fear, that's when you really fuck up, because you're going to start to like do something weird to like compensate for what you think.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, and I think with a lot of injuries, I don't know if you guys remember this, FloJo had pulled her hamstrings during Olympics, and they would show this video, is that when she came back, as she was going around, she pulled up right where she had pulled it last time and kept going. But, it's true, that mental piece, like it's, we have a kid, we had a volleyball athlete that this past spring, She basically had she tore 3 ligaments completely and got a bone bruise. And she plays a middle, so she has to move laterally.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
ligaments was the lateral ligament.
yeah.
And, one of the things that when we started returning her, because we have all these fun toys that people can use, but in the end, you still, to your point, you got to practice in what you actually have to go back to, because that's how she heard it. And so they would just start with walking, and that was weird for her. And then it's really taken her several months just to be able to get the footwork down again for what she has to do in her sport at high speed. So, which instead of just doing agilities, that doesn't necessarily for her translate into doing her sport.
Right.
Yeah.
And
it's weird. Like coming back on my first run, I was like, is this how I run? Is this my gait? How do I run? What is running? What is running? But then it's like, then that first time where you don't think like, oh shit, this is running. It's such a weird thing of just even a short, talk about the whole with Simone Biles. Yeah, she had, she got scared, and once you start to question yourself, you're setting yourself up to
For sure.
to really get, because if you're get disoriented when you're in the air,
right.
What is something like when you had talked about keeping a athlete in their sport without doing the same thing? So for sprinters, for example, or hurdlers, what would be some things that you would say would be equivalent to keeping them in shape for their sport without actually doing that as they're healing?
Yeah,
so what I did.
I
spent a lot of time in the running in water in a tank.
Right. We used to have a hydro pool, and now everyone would rather go in the Alter G. So
we didn't have that 20 years ago.
No. We could really de-weight someone.
Yes. I do recall. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, where it's not the exact same gait, because sprinters have a longer stride.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten on one of those before. Those are so bizarre. They feel so weird.
Right. And so they're not exactly the same. We have to, obviously, you have to get them back on, but because a treadmill in general is that you can't stride normal if you're a sprinter. If you're a team sport person, you're good to go, because they have little strides like soccer, but not in the, so, that's like a big one for them. So we use that a lot for that, and stress fractures, things like that, where as somebody is getting back a little bit closer, but maybe we don't want to totally load them that hard, we may start with that. And, even the biking, things like that is because it's not sprinting, but nothing, even hopping and jumping for those guys, it's like, like they're like, it's not, and it's funny, especially at, they're so young, like some of them are amazing athletes and they all lift, everyone has to lift, and they really like, even if you're lifting every part of your body except that leg, I mean, incorporating as much as you can into it. And also, and you guys already mentioned this, that it's also for the mental part. You have to feel, you got to keep your self like confident and part of the group, because what happens when you're hurt is like that isolation feeling. Like you have, when you come back, somebody's going to take my spot, or I'm not going to be good anymore. I'm going to just like, and those, at any age are hard, but especially at the younger age, where that is who they are right now. And it's part of a huge part of their identity. And I think, as you get a little older, for sure, you look at that as part, but it's probably not as big of a part as it was when you were, younger, and competing, getting a scholarship and
Right.
I mean, that's what happened with me. I had to switch events. I had gotten, well, I first had gotten sick, and then I had gotten injured plantar fasciitis my junior year, so I missed a good part of it. But I was always in the pool, and I was always in the bike, so my endurance was quite great. So my coach actually transitioned me indoors from running the 400 to running the 500 and the 600 because 600 is at Big Tens. 500 was in the old Big East. But yeah, if we didn't have those events, I don't necessarily know where I would have been because I did, end up losing my spot on our 4x4 because I didn't have my foot speed that I had quick enough. And then, but my coach he's actually now the coach of Arkansas. So best team out there running all those 49-second 400 runners. But yeah, it was like, we had talked about it and he was like, I think, we're going to make this transition. And I'm like, let's do it. And I ended up being pretty fucking good at it. So I was like, and Phaedra Fifi, who came on here, same thing, her same coach. Fifi ran at Arkansas. She came in as a 400 runner, had an injury, same story. She's now going back to the Olympics in Paris to run the 800. But she is, sometimes the injury unlocks a completely different event that you never would have done per se. And then that turned into being, even my senior year, I was like, I started to love indoor track more because I loved the 500 and I tolerated 600 and I was pretty good at it. So, it is, but that was definitely a big thing. And then having the support of teammates, and just kind of knowing that like, okay, I can get I can get points at Big Tens in this event. But yeah, if you just lose your spot in the relay and that's it, that mentally is so hard.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like you were open to it, we get this all the time. The 800 runners tend to have to run cross country. And one of the 800 runners, like one year, I think she was a sophomore, she was really frustrated and because she didn't do well in cross country. And I was like, you look at her and you're like 800, she's an 800, right? Yeah. And I was just like, yeah, but like you've been doing really well in track and, maybe, cross country, like maybe cross country is to help you get into shape for
the preseason.
Yeah. At the time, didn't want to exactly hear that. And we had a relationship that we could talk like that. I wasn't like, who cares about cross country, but, and she's done amazing when she sort of let go of that. And then Dave, the coach, started pulling her early to train so that she wouldn't get too far away from the 800. And she ended up like finishing her career because she just let go of this thought that she either had to be good at both or she just wasn't good. And when she let go of that, I mean, she had an amazing track career. So
yeah, more and more 800 runners are with the sprint groups now. I mean, it's just kind of crazy how it's changed. And to answer your question about the pool, running in the pool definitely helps because it keeps your cardio up. Like literally, we're thinking of a tank that's like 10 feet. I'm just strapped in and I'm just running, right? So that's just think of long, steady state cardio. But then when you mix it in with the bike, where you can get the intervals, then you're getting that shorter one. Obviously now, you have way more things, but 20 years ago, yes, it did. My cardio was incredible because I was in the pool every single morning before class. And even if the temperature wasn't quite warm enough, didn't matter. I was in there.
But when you go back, most people still get gassed and you're so from.
Oh yeah. It's a tough transition.
But
our bodies know.
Yeah, you have to keep your mind like
it's all up here
on the target because we know like, and then once somebody comes back, you really want to keep them healthy for 3 months. If they could make 3 months, like please, it's just like you're trying to manage their load so that it's not monotonous. They have high, low. You're working with the coach. Some coaches are better at it than others because they know. And then every athlete is different. Some athletes just cannot maybe do the same volume as others, you know.
Right.
So there's all these components,
Mm-hmm.
but you're just like, your goal is like, God, 3 months in a row, you know, is just
Yeah.
that you can. And then usually once they get over that hump, they tend to do pretty good. But
Yeah.
it's not always easy. But it's for me, it really is the coaches feeling like that they'll listen to me. That I want the same thing that they do. I want that athlete
I'm
back.
surprised all the coaches aren't like, whatever you want to, like, you are the goddess here, and anything you say goes. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, Dave does not give props to many people, and like I feel like you are maybe one of a few over the last 20 years. I've always heard him just say the most gracious, immense, wonderful things about, and I'm like, I believe it. I believe it.
But
So that anyone doesn't listen to you floors me.
Yeah, but you know what's, I do think, and I appreciate, and I've learned that, you know, everybody has to have a voice in the process, right?
True.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true.
And like the coaches with these kids, like so much that they do know a lot about that athlete.
True.
You know, so it's like this balance of like, how can we do it? And I think all of us have to sort of not have an ego, right? We just all have to be like, okay, like, let's try it, you know?
And
But
it's like, you know, pressure, college coaches, your job rides on what 19 and 20-year-olds do.
I know.
That's real. When you think about it, like, that's tough. Like, there's just dealing with people that young as it is. And then the higher up in the divisions you go in D1, the more pressure it is, right? And so it is a ton, like your salary, your livelihood, your life depends on how these athletes perform. So if your star is out, it's a lot, right?
So what happens when you have so we talk about the athletes who have, fear and how bouncing back, and I've heard a lot, especially in the track realm, it happens a lot, like pulled hamstrings, ankles, all the things, and then they get back out there and they're like, oh no, I can't, I think I felt a little something. What about the athletes that are opposite, where they're kind of like, they do get injured, but they're like, I'm fine, I'm good. And so even if they're like not telling you what they're doing, they're going off in their home, like, because they're not trusting the process of healing because they feel okay. Or like, oh, it's a little sore, but it'll be okay. Do you find that happens a lot, or more so not so much?
Yeah, I do. And I think, especially as I've done
Depending sport. Yeah.
I've done it longer. I always let someone have their story, and I try to sort of meet them where they're at, because they have to learn it. It's not going to be me telling them. So I'm patient with people. But usually that's why my assessments with those, like, we do strength tests and other things so that they can see deficits.
Yeah.
Right.
You know? And I'm careful in that this isn't about them being weak or strong, because your language is important, right? They're so competitive with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And besides the fact that in my realm, kids are often not weak unless they're post-surgical. It's more inhibition and a tight muscle rest in a shortened position. And so, often once it may appear tight, but then we like activate the deeper system and it relaxes and they get their range back. So I try to educate them about their bodies so that eventually that they'll have the education that maybe they can make a different decision for themselves. And if not, I'm still going to treat them.
Sure.
But there's occasionally kids, like, it might take till their senior year and then they're like, God, I wish I would have. And I said, yeah, we're all like that. Right. Wish I would have, but that's part of learning for them. And we actually had an athlete that had, like, she had a sort of a mental break, and she was hospitalized. And when she came back, she would kind of come back and lift weights. And she was trying to get back because she had been out for a while. And she was in intensive outpatient at the time. And she would come and she'd be doing good for a couple of weeks, and I wouldn't see her, and she'd come back and she'd be all down on herself. And I said, well, you keep coming back. So like I go, you just keep coming back. It doesn't matter if it's not the next day. I said, just keep coming back. And she got through it, and she actually ended up doing really well and running really well. And, you know, one day we were talking about it, and I said, because I said, what you did was incredible coming back from that. Like, a lot of people wouldn't have come back from it, but every day you came back. And I said, you got to remember that when you want something, you keep coming back and doing it, and you have to trust yourself, because maybe you wouldn't have come back because it wasn't for you, but it was for you. So it's a way for them to learn about themselves. And she had to figure that out for herself. And I was just there for the days that she came. I was there and I helped her on those days, but it's a really hard thing for someone that age, any age, to go through. So I mean, so we see a little bit of everything. And she had, like, you know, her knee would hurt, this would hurt, but she would keep coming back. Because when you're off that long of training, oh God, your body trying to get back to, like, college track, whoa, it's
a monster. You know, the old NCAA commercial is, most of us go pro in something other than sports. So learning about ourselves. But I wanted to switch gears real quick, because we've been talking for a while. But Sue, we haven't even talked about your background. And what made you go into sports medicine? Because you went to New Mexico, right, for undergrad. Were you an athlete there? Were you an athlete before? Talk a little about your history.
Yeah, I was. I played basketball since I was little. And you know, I grew up when you know, there was no girls on the little league team. There was no baseball team for girls. So like, I was the only girl on my little league team. And but I went to college for basketball, and I got interested. I always liked sports. And I actually first was a personal trainer. And I was always getting these people that were always hurt. And so I decided I would go back to school for sports medicine. And that's kind of how I got started. And my partner is a physician, and she does sports medicine and peds ortho. And so that just, like, accelerated just sort of the kind of reading the research, and really, like, trying to learn from people that were doing the research. And because there's a lot of stuff out there that isn't correct. And when you're not in the field, you don't know. And sometimes when students come, they ask, you know, who should I read for this, or tendinopathy? Who do you like for, you know, hips, and blah, blah, blah. And in sports medicine, you know, just like you want a really good coach, right? And that's how you become the best. In sports medicine, you know, your mentors, like, I've been in this hip academy for like 6 years. The woman is a master therapist. It's from Australia. And we get to present cases. And so it's kind of fun for me, because I present, like, some of the kids. But I just, I think being in sports, and I think the opportunity that it provides for kids, and, like, getting scholarships, kids that might not have that opportunity, I think it's tremendous. And I'm sad if it goes to where we're paying kids, and there'll be some sports that, like, they won't have as many scholarships. And I think some of the sports where those kids wouldn't be here any other way. So I hope that doesn't happen for those reasons, because I think sport is is a great vehicle for people to learn, to set goals and accomplishments. And and I think that is the part that I I like being part of their lives. They look at me totally different now the older you get, but they still trust me and come to me when they need to, and they know what I'm going to tell them don't do, because I'm a lot older than them. But I still learn something new every day. So and I still really enjoy it. Of course, like everything, there's some things administratively we don't like, but I still like treating kids and doing return to plays and actually seeing how well they do. It is just because it was their work that did it and they stuck with it. And
yeah, absolutely.
it's just nice to see. It's gratifying.
Yeah.
When you had, and I meant to say this earlier and I forgot, we were talking about FIFA and the stuff in women's soccer. I don't think this is connected with FIFA, but I was reading, I think it was last year, the U.S. women's team was doing sports bra research with sensors on to basically build custom sports bras for there. And that was one of the, I think it was the Up to Speed book that I was reading where I had never thought of it, right? I'm a child of the 80s. Like, sports bras were always a thing, but they weren't a thing until the 70s, apparently. And the person that first proposed it was like, people nominated them for like the worst invention or something, like, because men were like, what do you need that for? So it's like, we didn't even have them, you know what I mean? Then we got them in the basic thing. And now we're finally in the 2020s, we're actually doing the research on what works for women. And then it was like, if they actually have a well-fitting sports bra, it was like the stress of this. They would run faster, right? They wouldn't necessarily hunch over. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about boobs and bras and all that fun women stuff that men don't have.
Well, and there's hardly any, there's only like, I know there's one woman, I can't remember her name.
Research on it.
Because there's hardly any people that research it, right? So because it's not like a glorious thing, and you find that in certain aspects of sports medicine. And I think that's why this research consortium for women is like a big deal. And because people feel like these things happen and women, are getting, Title IX and research and all that, but it's sustaining these things, for women that I think, because we still know like health disparities, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but, there's still a real thing, and it goes back to having access, and in some of the research they're doing with women, it's things like they're looking at like, what are all your barriers, like to not having, like, because maybe they do, depending on their age, have to worry about childcare issues and, and even like not knowing anything about training. Like they never learned anything, never had a good coach. And there's a lot of things like that. Like in CPS, it's the math teacher or, so it's like, having access to things that aren't so expensive that you can't afford it, like weight training and all these prevention programs now that they have, which are terrific. And they try to do them at super low cost so that more kids do participate in sport.
Right.
But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And something too as simple as a sports bra, they would say like some women that, I'm not larger chested, wasn't blessed in that area, but for some women that are, like, it's a barrier to entry for sports. And that's, if you're uncomfortable, you can't, why are you going to do something that you're uncomfortable with? And it's just one of those things where I didn't necessarily think a lot about it because it wasn't something that, like, well, especially too, like I had B cup, or I have like, I don't have that massive bounce, right? I don't have that massive force, but when you think about it, oh yeah, like that would be miserable, right? And so just this
The
most
tearing
basic,
feeling.
the
And it's not
most
healthy.
basic, because I put on bad feeling sports bras and I'm like, hey, I don't like this one, but there's always, for me, there's always something on the market that would be fine for what I needed, but for a lot of our fellow women, there wasn't or there isn't, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, we got to make sure everyone's represented here and let people just be comfortable. Like,
Yeah.
simplest thing. Or not wearing white shorts as bottoms for women's soccer either.
Yeah. So I remember there was on volleyball, because we would supply the sports bra, and I think depending if we were Adidas or Nike, they give you
They
the.
don't fit. Yeah.
So there'd be these girls, they'd be like D's, and they'd be like, "Can I have a medium?" I'm like, "A medium," because they would ask, or could I have two? Because they weren't like really supportive. So they were just, and I was like, God, that doesn't seem very healthy wearing it. But I said, if you want, but yeah, you're right about that. And now there's all different kinds, but for sure for the bigger chested women, yes, that I remember that. I'd be like, how can you fit into a medium?
Yeah.
But they did, because
of the band size, right? The band size of the large would be too large, and so
right, they flip out of them.
Yeah,
So,
it's things designed by men.
Yep.
When there's not enough women in the room, these are the things that happen. And it's just, first of all, bras should never be small, medium, and large. Because, you know what I mean? Because you have a band size and a cup size. Like, this shouldn't be that difficult.
Yeah.
There was this woman, I think she graduated from Creighton, and she is promoting, she's trying to start a company that makes the compression tights, and it's made out of, I think it's graphene. Have you guys ever heard of that?
No.
But it's lighter. But she said she wanted to make something like for women, because when she played soccer, she had an eating disorder, and she was really self-conscious of her body and what she wore. And they make also clothing too that's supposed to help with wicking. So, and it's a brand new startup, because she was just asking me, because they're trying to do some research and stuff with it. Because I asked if it was medical grade, because the thought with the compression garments is that the medical grade probably offer more compression and is more helpful to, especially after you have games and you have to hop on a flight.
Right, the recovery stuff.
Right.
Flights.
Versus just a regular pair of tights. But they're usually a little more expensive. But I think, and I was looking it up, because I think they do use it in medical devices. So but I don't know exactly, because she didn't really know. So I think she's just starting out. But I said super cool. I think
it is a cool idea.
The more ideas we can get on the table, the better, right? Not everything will work out, but it's like we can feed off each other and learn as we go, and let's try stuff, right? If no one's ever tried it, let's give it a try. I mean, it sounds interesting, right? Because compression is, I don't know about y'all, but if you've had a long run, putting on a pair of actual real compression sleeves or socks, it's
totally different.
You're different.
You feel like it's hugging you all day. You're like, I feel so loved.
Your weighted blanket, your own personal weighted blanket. Yeah. And if you can get the compression in a lightweight material, because compression stuff can be hot when it's at medical grade. So you're kind of sweating a bit. Oh, that actually sounds genius to me. I'm like, tell me more.
And even clothing, women's volleyball and some of the basketball kids, they're tall and their shoulders are super wide, and they're usually thin. And some of the gear, they're always complaining to me. They're like, who does this fit? They're wearing an extra large and the sleeve is that.
Yeah. It was made for the throwers, right?
Because because they're always like, just get us the guys if this is what we got to wear. And it's so weird looking and it fits weird. But so it's the same thing like with the clothes for the women.
Yeah.
Again, it's not made for people that are athletic.
No, this is such a funny story. One of my first like bodybuilding competitions, I did bikini. And I remember Dave was like, well, why don't you go on as a sprinter? So I like decorated shoes and I had like the wings on the shoes, you know, and we got the official USA outfit for the sprinters that year. And granted, at this time, like bikini competitors, like we still had like softness. We're not like super ripped. So I put on the outfit and it was like a half shirt and the things. Well, you know, when you're not warming up and like running, it compresses, but then like everything went to my waist. So like I was bloating out because everything was so compressed. And I was like, yeah, that did not look the way that I needed it to look for that outfit. But when it comes to athlete, like that's what they need. You need that stuff to stay warm, right? And so I was like, that was a fail, but it looked good at the moment, but compression doesn't work.
Yeah.
So so the compression does work. I did want to go on a little bit of a tangent though from this and ask about, because obviously you work with, you know, we're talking about a lot of professional / college athletes. And we talked about, you know, women now, especially when we get into the like people in sports now, like with pickleball and paddle and all these things that are just, I have my own idea about those things. But what about on the younger? So like pre-menstrual cycle, right? So we're talking about these young girls, and I mean, there's so much with gymnastics, dance, all the things. So I know like my little cousin, she's, I don't even know, maybe 12, 9. She's like fractured her ankle, broke her wrist, was still doing backflips on a broken ankle, on a fractured ankle. Like she's still doing all these things. And I'm like, honey, I know that like you're a badass and you think like this is okay to do because you're in a boot. And I like would tell her mom, you know, my cousin, I'm like, I don't know if like talking about the chain, you know, she does the flippy floppies in her, you know, in cheer. She's light, she's flexible as all heck. And so when we think about our kids now at that age where they're breaking bones, what's the best way as a parent to like go about that? Do we need trainers outside and PTs outside to kind of manage, or are they just going to heal and it's going to be fine?
Well, I think, and you guys probably have heard about sports specialization not being good, that kids need to just, first of all, if a kid doesn't want to play a sport, you shouldn't make them.
So
be fun, right? Because we know like that kids that they're not developing,
Right.
enjoying it, so it's probably not. So you know, at a young age they're trying things out, but you know, genetics is a big thing, right? Some kids are just like, even when they're, you know, 8 years old, they're like, wow, this kid's a good dancer, and they like it. So some kids actually like it, and that's what like feeds that doing it a lot. But like I will say that often it's way too much, that they're doing too much at a young age, and you do pay the price, and you know, your tendons and things like that, you know, pay the price, and that doesn't revert or change. I mean, your bones heal really well, but you know, but the one thing I'll say about gymnastics is that you're old when you're in your 20s.
Yep.
So if someone really is going for gymnastics, that is when you go, you know. And so you know, and if the kid likes it, and there are kids that they love it.
They do.
The parents like, you're doing it too much, but the kid that's different, you know. But I think you still have to limit the time. But in some of these really competitive gyms, the coaches, if you want to go to be the level 10 and try out for the Olympics. That is how you have to train to do that. So, but
Sure.
if you're not going down that route and, you know, because there's like kids, they're so over programmed now. Like, I mean, it's like they go from this sport to that sport and, you know, and they're only, you know, 7. So, you know, and I know it's a parent's decision. And, you know, some families, you know, it's funny because most of the coaches at DePaul, because everyone was having kids, and, you know, you would say, you would ask the coach, well, because do your kids play whatever, say softball, and do you travel with them? And they're like, no, they can play somewhere around here in the city. They don't need to be doing that. You know,
9-year-olds do not need to be on a travel baseball team.
Yeah.
Like there's people that do it for kids that are like 7, 8. The kid will like it in the park. Why are you dedicating a whole weekend going to Indiana and Wisconsin for your kids? It's more for you than it is for the kid. Like,
and that's, I think, when it is different, because there are kids that like it for sure, and the parents are like, but there's also the opposite. So there's a balance, but
there is. It's hard, you know. Usually by like middle school, right? The kids that are most likely going to be like D1 athletes, we are aware of which kids those are, right? Yeah. And middle school was really when I started doing, first I was doing travel soccer, and then, you know, AAU, summer, all those track things. And part of it too was local level. It wasn't fun because I would, you know, just destroy everyone, right? So you do need to find that balance of giving your kid the opportunities to do stuff, but it's also like, you know, you don't want that to, you don't want as a parent, you don't want to push that either, right? I mean, I had a coworker asked me not too long ago about, you know, my track career, you know, how much do my parents, you know, push me into it? My parents didn't push me at all. Like there was absolutely no pressure. In Michigan, women's soccer is also a spring sport. So I knew I could not do both track and soccer in high school, you know, because I was like, I'm going to be a D1 athlete. So I have to pick. I picked track because I did not like to head the ball. I was like, I did not like that part of soccer. And I was like, I'm just really fast. But you know that it was never guided by my parents, right? I was like, I wanted to do summer track, right? I wanted to, you know, go to these like summer, you know, AAU meets that are out of state and this or that. And they were supportive of it. When people asked like, oh, how much did your parents? My parents would push me to do anything. Like they introduced me to sports, and, you know, I got into soccer because that was my dad's, you know, favorite sport to play, but he also did biking. I tried that. I didn't like that. You know, I did swimming because my mom did swimming. I did horseback riding. My sister loves horseback riding. I didn't. So I was introduced to a lot of things, but it's like so important that it wasn't like, oh, you're really athletic, so you're going to do X, Y, Z, and then this sport you're going to here. They go here, here. I didn't have that. I always tell people, if you want your kids to succeed in sports, like you let them guide it and also focus on the academics, because the better academics are, the more doors are going to be open for you. Then you can always have the possibility of walking onto teams and, you know, get academic scholars. That's my soapbox on these parents these days that are taking their 7 and 8-year-olds and putting them on travel baseball teams. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really is different. And, you know, obviously families make different choices, but
some of them are wrong, and that's okay. I can say that.
My daughter, like
it's your show. You can say whatever you want.
I sure will.
It's like, I played since I was a little kid on the playgrounds with boys.
Yeah.
And I loved, like, I played anything. And then, but like now with my daughter, she's not really that athletic, but she tries different things. And
how old is she?
She's 10 now. Like she's done swimming, horseback riding, but she's not like, whoa, like it's just, she would rather do arts and crafts. And she plays a saxophone, but
nice.
Even though we're both sports people, we're like, okay, like, whatever. But so I think but we also see the sort of the downside of sports and the top
Yeah.
side of sports. People tend to glamorize things, but
Yeah.
working as hard as some of these kids have to work to be at these levels and stay at them, it's a lot. So you give up things. I mean, people see when people do well and at the meets and stuff, but it's a lot of hours and up late at night being exhausted, but you still got to study for a test. And oh, you got to travel on a bus to go to this meet. So it's not just like, whoa, it's so fun. There's a lot of parts about it that are a grind,
I
but
think the higher up in the sports the parents are, the less likely they are to pressure their kids into it.
yes.
It's like the people that
Yeah.
didn't have the glory. Because one of my good girlfriends, she ran the 400 on Great Britain's Olympic team in 2012. Her husband ran the 800 on that team, and he's a two-time Olympian. They're both Olympians, right? They have 3 kids. You're like, those kids are probably going to be super fast. Do they push them into track? No, I mean, the kids are younger now, but she's like, oh, if they're interested in track, we'll certainly do it. They want to do something else, but because they both know the commitment that it takes to become an Olympian, and they do not want to put that type of pressure on their kids. And if their kids want to go on another journey, and it's just so refreshing, you know what I mean? But it's like also like they both are so aware of what goes into that, and so they get it.
And
so
they've
I do
studied
think
that.
yeah.
They've studied that if you have parents that have played at a higher level,
really?
That your kids are likely to be more successful and also play at a higher. That was the most predictive of someone like going professional or.
Well, and genetics is a huge component of it too, right? Like you can't.
Yes.
You can buy every single private coach. You can do all these things in the world. There's a great book. I can't remember the name of it, but the whole thing is on nature versus nurture. It goes basically sport by sport of what parts of these are genetic, what parts of this is that, and so much of it is.
Right.
Are you a freak of nature? Are you naturally gifted? If you're not, you're everyone has a ceiling. Some people's ceilings are lower. It's just, for those of us that went to the next, like, fine, where's our ceiling? This is my ceiling. People's ceiling's here. Some people, you can work as hard as me and you can get last place in every race, right? And that is nothing to do with that person's like effort. That's nothing to do with who they are. Like, my girlfriend Shayna, she trained just as hard as me. We trained, were training partners for 2 years. We did all of our workouts together. She went to the Olympics. I was happy to make a Big Ten final. Our ceilings were very different, and that's okay, because everyone, we both put in a lot and we both got out a lot. But it's like, I could not be an Olympian because I did not have, some of those genetic components that she had. It didn't matter if my parents spent, thousands of dollars on private anything. It wouldn't
My
be there.
don't make you better.
No. And it's a lot of these parents. So off that tangent, another thing though, talking about young athletes, I told you this is like a topic that I'm like, I have so many opinions on. You're
like many,
about,
it happens.
Yeah, you're talking.
I love you for it. This is why you have a show.
I know Phaedra's like, let me just set Sherry off. Just
I love
buttons. So I do get passionate about things. So, but one thing that, coming from the track world, right? Because Phaedra brought up about like young gymnasts, but we do have a problem in track and field, especially for young women. It affects men as too, but young women who become like distance phenoms, right? When they're really young. They go and they win like New Balance as like a freshman before they have their period, right? I mean, there's been some great books about this. And then puberty hits, right? And we have that cycle, right? We get into the anorexia or the bulimia, or we, start to have like low iron, low bone mass, kind of going into all of that, like. And I've been seeing more and more, like, people would post in different track and running groups about like, oh, this young, kid just ran a marathon. People like, should we be running marathons at that age? So kind of talk about that too, about like girls, especially that have success before they get their period, and then the coaches kind of do stuff to delay it, and then when they get it, it's like it's tough. And I know there's no necessarily right answer, right? Because if you don't, but at what age do we start to freak out? For example, if like a woman hasn't had her period yet, right? If we're in college and we haven't had our period, is that something that's gonna, as a sports medicine doctor, are you gonna flag that?
Well, we used to call it the female triad, and now it's Red S.
Mm-hmm.
And nutrition is, I mean, it's so critical, period, but especially for athletes, and especially females. But and Red S kind of goes into looking at everything, the social, the nutrition, and managing, so it has such a psychological component to it also.
Might be the biggest part, right? Especially if you think of how much success you had when you were small. And sometimes people think that they had the success because they were small, not because they, had just had that natural gift.
Yeah. And so I'm most comfortable in sort of the college setting. I don't do pediatrics that much. I do mainly college, but so it's pretty common, especially like the distance kids. I mean, they're borderline, and we try, if they meet with the nutritionist, they know like what calories are in half of a grape. I mean, it's not that they don't know that. And we try to get them in therapy, but it's one of the more severe, mental disorders. And it sometimes doesn't have a good outcome, and they often have it for quite a while. And often, I mean, even in most cross country races, the kids that win aren't those really gaunt kids. They're the kids that like they have muscle, and they're fit, but and they probably aren't getting their period because and some of them might be on the pill, but the pill is not is not helping them one bit. So, and I mean, to what degree, I'm sure we'll have more when more research comes out, but it doesn't change their outcome. It's not helping their bone density so and a lot of women want to go on it that with eating disorders, and it's just masking that they don't get their period. And it's pretty high, and we know it.
I didn't even think about that.
Fractures, right? Like, and that's the first thing we look at, when we have like where they get like it's their second, their third stress fracture.
Because you just don't have that bone density.
Yeah.
And it's I'm blanking on the Feldman, I think is her last name, because she wrote a great book of great distance runner, right? Won all these things in high school, kind of became a woman in college, and so the coaches kind of just pushed her to the side because she wasn't doing well, then had success later. But the whole thing, when you're talking about how the best athletes look, because in her mind, when she was smaller, she had success. She never could. It took her a while to connect with the fact that because her body was growing, that didn't mean the success wasn't tied to it. But she also didn't have coaches that understood how the female body changes and what puberty does, what your menstrual cycle does, and all that thing. And maybe she needed a little bit of time, right, to recover a bit. And so it is hard. Coming from a track background, like I definitely, had some teammates that you knew something was wrong, and then they're not on the team the next year, right? And it's really hard. And like you said, it's already been going on for years before they get to you. And they also know that a lot of it is going to keep happening when they leave you. So, kind of what is you talk about the more research and this and getting people to therapy, and
So
it's tough. I don't know if there's what the answer is.
no, and it's, multifactorial, and,
Yeah.
some kids don't make it and
Yeah.
they have to withdraw.
Yeah.
There's, a little bit of probably everything. I think the awareness, mental health with the NCAA is a huge thing. And so the hope is, I think, that you get to kids sooner. And like, we're fortunate enough, and a lot of schools now have a nutritionist on staff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked about that they do understand, but
It's not always about the nutrition though. It's
Yeah.
deeper than just
You don't
eating.
necessarily want people that have some type of disordered eating pattern to really get into counting calories, because it's like the number of calories doesn't necessarily matter when it takes into apart how much exercising you're doing. Like, it's all,
But you guys could probably chime in with your own experiences on this, but in college in general, because of the social pressure that women feel to be skinny, because it always comes back to this, right? Like how I look. Even now, like a lot of our female athletes, it's like, it's borderline because it's a continuum, right? You're not always like,
No.
it's like a bell curve, right? But a lot of them have some weird relationships when they're in with food, with how they look, with blah, blah, blah. And even if they're not really thin, it still might be where maybe they have a little bit of bulimia or, or they're taking something to, so that suppress their appetite, or
they're just logging every single calorie, right? They might look fit, they might not qualify for any of these, but they're obsessive about it, right?
And then,
they're logging everything.
Sure. And the one underlying thing, I dealt with bulimia for a very, very long time, and just in disordered eating and all the things. And a lot of times it maybe starts out as one thing, and then you get to a certain point of like competing, right? And competing in college, whether it's with yourself, in sports, with other women, with other men, whatever. And all of a sudden it becomes your way of controlling everything. So it's now not just about how I'm looking, it's about, okay, how I don't know how I'm going to do, but I know that this is the one thing that I have control over. It also affects like your it's some way to calm you down. It's a way to get you high. It's a way, there's like all these things that are happening in your brain chemistry, because especially like with bulimia, right? It's the same thing as like winning the lottery or going to a casino. You're having this dopamine reaction. You're having these reactions that are just like, it's so much more. And so like a nutritionist is great because it's like, okay, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I know I need to eat. I know what, and they will, and someone with an eating disorder will tell you exactly what they need to do.
Yes.
Exactly. They know every single thing, because it's not about the eating at all. It's about all the other things. And it's hard. That's why I think that nutritionists, but it's like, it's a health, and that's why you said a lot of times things can work depending on where they're at in that cycle. Or if they see a change and an improvement in their if it's about physical stuff, about their performance, on why they want to stay lean and stay lighter. And all of a sudden, I know that with me, all of a sudden you start putting on muscle and you start like, oh, wait, I'm stronger. I'm sleeping better. I feel better. I'm looking better, and I'm performing better. But that takes such a time. And otherwise it's like, then the ones that don't, because you got things at home that they're not able to deal with because they're at school, or things at school, and all, like, so much, and it's really hard. And we could have a
great point. Yeah, Phaedra, when you said something about like the high of it, right? Because it is that self-destructive behavior. So when we look at anyone that self-harms in any capacity, right? Because and I've spoken, I've had mental health issues. I've been good old psych ward myself, and there is, when you have an anxiety, you go up and up and up, and then you do whatever that self-harm thing is, it kind of like gives you that weird self-control thing.
Yeah.
And so some people, they do use food in that. Some people, might cut themselves. Some people might use drugs. There's all types of ways. And so it's hard, right? Because we have something on the outside that looks like it's just about food. It's also psychological, right? We're getting into that self-harm aspect too. So there's so many different, and people do different things. Because I did have one person say like, oh, like, they said like I was bulimic. I was never bulimic, but one way that I would make myself calm down was to make myself throw up. That was my self-harm thing. And then if you look at, it's a weird one.
Interesting.
But if you look at like, because like when I get anxious, my stomach would hurt. You know what I mean? So
Oh,
I just need
yeah,
to like
so you would get it
that
out.
feeling of getting it out, right?
Yeah.
And so, but when you look at like people list like, oh, these are different ways people self-harm, they don't put like making yourself throw up under there. They put it underneath bulimia. But it's like I did not have
that wasn't about that.
I did not worry about food I was eating. I did not. But if my anxiety was sky high and I needed to feel in control of my body, that's what I would do. Terrible thing to do. Unfortunately, I got help early enough that it didn't, turn into anything long term. But it's like, all these weird things, right? It's never so simple.
No, and in the track world, I always have and Sue, I think you can understand, you might like get this, and all of us could. When you look at across the field of track athletes, you know exactly which athlete is which in each sport, and their personalities completely go with that sport. I think in a lot of ways, I would say 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
And so then, and I think each group will have their ways.
Temporary distraction,
Yes.
Self-harm.
Yes, it is. And each group will have their specific ways of dealing with their stress. So that's another thing. And so Sue, do you, because you're, in that athletic training center, because you're spending time with people who are hurt or injured, do a lot of the athletes, like you are one of maybe the first people that are on, like, and you're looking out for stuff that's happening. So you might not diagnose, but see a change or say something like that these kids are going through?
So what we've gone to, because to your point, is kids will seek out someone that for whatever reason they feel like they can trust or connect with. And so it could be an academic advisor, a strength coach, and so for years, right now, we just hired a woman who sort of oversees our like mental health and wellness. But for years, we never really had somebody that's actually their real job. And ultimately they would get to me unless, like, so for instance, say it was the academic advisor and, she's like, yeah, I don't think the kid will come to see you because they don't want anyone to know. And I'm like, okay, I'll give you the information and I'll tell you what to do. The most important thing is to get the kid to get some help. And so I would just be in the back with those kids. And most kids would end up with me, but I think it's important that, first of all, to have everyone in the department kind of look out for kids, not just because there is kids, they like love the strength coaches, and the strength coaches will come to me and be like, Sue, what do I do? That they told me blah, blah, blah. And, we talk it through and we say, are you comfortable? And I said, because you have to ask that kid's permission to talk to me, and ask if they want help, because sometimes kids will talk to you, but they're not ready to get help. So we talk it through and see if we could, and even if the kid, unless the kid was doing something that I was really worried about, and then I would pull the kid in and I would just say, this isn't a punishment. I'm worried about you. And often I would say, could you just go one time for me? If you don't like it or you don't want to go back, you don't have to, but I'm worried about you. And usually kids would. So, but so we tried, and we still try to do that, but then we had, because we didn't have the staff. So, I think because not everyone probably feels the same about going to me as some of these other people, right? Because
for sure.
And kids fear their coaches finding out the most out of anything. It's like they project the mom or the dad on the coaches.
And disappointing them.
Yes. And, even though mental health has really come a long way, I will say kids are still like, it's okay if my teammate goes, but I don't want anyone to know if I go.
Yep.
So, and often we're constantly trying to see if kids will do groups and stuff because of the cost.
Oh, yeah.
But no one ever wants to do it. They all want that. I don't know if it's isolation or the one-on-one. And look, some kids need one-on-one. There's different types of disorders, but some kids, if you have a good facilitator, we think that might also be supportive in nature, but it's really hard, at least for us right now. And I hope that changes to get the group thing off the ground.
Yeah, it would be.
It's it sounds like a good plan though at some point to keep advocating for.
Yeah.
So I love it. So we've been talking for like almost an hour and a half.
I know I feel like Sue, we're gonna have you on like once a semester.
I know, yeah, we're gonna do it again. But we've talked a lot about some of the harder, things that have affected women, so the struggles that female athletes go through. But I kind of wanted to end on some positivity. This weekend, Phaedra and I are going to go watch women's soccer at Wrigley Field.
The Red Stars?
Yeah, the Red
Stars are playing there.
I love it.
And so, kind of as your closing question, Sue, what are you most excited about in the world of women's sports for 2024?
I mean, I am really excited about this research for a number of reasons. Because even if they find because what they'll probably find is different categories, right? Like some people it doesn't affect and some that it does. But I think, gosh, it could change what we do during certain times for certain kids. Could we prevent more injuries this way? And training load. So on the elite level, like in women's soccer, especially, you'll hear this all over the world that I remember listening to a lecture by the physio from Australia who was traveling with their women's national team. She was lecturing and, she said that when they go to the World Cup, they'll bring the men's physio over to help them when they go. And she's like, yeah, she said, and the men's physio was a woman and was like, wow, if I had that same injury in a guy, I'd be okay often letting them go see if they can play. But in the women, they don't do that. They're much more conservative because they've found if they're not, it spirals instead of just, okay, let's rest and then get them back healthy. If they don't do that, they may risk injuring them and it's just not worth it. But in the men, it seems, that probably because they have more muscle mass and they probably recover a little quicker from it than women because we're not the same. And so, so it's quite interesting. And so load monitoring, especially in women's sports, a game changer of preventing injuries and learning on, in fact, okay, one last thing, and this is so boring for you guys probably, but so with Catapult tracks, for soccer, it tracks linear, accelerations and high speed stuff. But there was a guy that he was a physio in elite sports, and he developed this software where he's like a physics guy that it lays on top of the Catapult. And what he looks at is the accelerations in change of direction, because often no one uses change of direction, thinks of it as an load. But what they've found is that because so when you're driving in the car, even if you're still going 30 miles an hour and you turn, you'll go like this, right?
Right.
Well, that's an acceleration, right? And so I'm working harder every time I'm accelerating when I'm cutting, right? And so
Yeah.
you can calculate those things. And without it, you're not getting the full picture of how much load. And so I look at like women's soccer, they'll be like, oh, we're going to have an easy day. We'll do short-sighted games. Well, those are like a million cuts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really super hard on your calves
Interesting.
because acceleration is almost like 60% your soleus. And so, but anyway, so there's all these like little things I think that we could do to monitor women's sports better to increase their performance level without
injury,
right? And it's to me, load monitoring is like critical, but sometimes coaches are like, no, they need to be doing all this. And I'm like, you have to train who's before you, not who you want before you. They're not elite, right?
Yeah.
Like they can't train like those people. Like train them like you'll actually make them better, not like elite kids better,
Definitely. I get like younger, like high school when I train, when I have parents bring them in and they're like, well, their coaches said that they need to do, box jumps and they need to do more dynamic stuff. I'm like, they don't even know how to do a squat. How am I going to have them do explosive movement? Like they want them to be strong, like hockey players. They want them to be explosive on the ice, yet she can't like even do this correctly first. I'm like, okay, but so
maybe those kids should never be doing certain things, right?
Yeah.
Because genetics, like you can improve everyone, but some people, they're not designed to play at those levels and to be able to tolerate those loads.
Some people do not have their 90% type 1 muscle fiber, right? So they just don't have an explosive bone in their body.
But also high school coaches are not always, I mean, they're starting their kids off, or they're science teachers and other teachers, so they don't understand that like what their kids are supposed to be doing, And so it's a whole lot of, it's a learning curve for sure. But that's I'm excited about that research too. So I'm gonna have to keep us updated on that because that's really cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
It will be. Yeah, I'm excited about it. So that's what I'm excited about in 2020.
Very cool.
I love it. I love it. Actually, one last question too. I think I know what the answer is, but Paris 2024, which women's team are you, or female athlete or women's team are you most excited to watch in Paris?
You know what I'm excited about that? It is the first time ever that there's equal men and women. In fact, there might be like 52%.
It's like 51%. Yeah.
I'm just
wow.
And I know they had to add.
I didn't know that.
And they took some, like there's some things like freestyle wrestling has women, but the Greco-Roman is just men still. But I just thought, whoa, that's
really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I mean, and I guess I've seen so much, and it kind of does this with the women. So I just want, could we just keep going this way?
Yeah.
And keep advocating for the same sort of resources and that, because now women's sports are making a lot of money. And I'll tell you one thing, that with like the Sky, we were trying to find a jersey for my daughter, and you can't even buy things. Like
they can't.
And again, like people would buy more stuff, but they just don't even produce it.
And there's not a ton of options. Yeah.
Oh, there's really options. And I mean, my hope is that stuff will change too, because all these things sort of help improve opportunities for women, period, as being these strong, resilient, people that we are. So
I love it. Well, Sue, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to get you back because I already
I know.
We mostly talk about track, right? We just did skim.
I know we were treetops.
We were all over. I know.
I absolutely love it. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Sue.
Thanks for asking me, you guys.
Of course.
And enjoy your summer vacation, before
Yeah.
the kids come back.
Enjoy. Thank you so much.
All right.
Guys.
Yep. Bye.
Oh,
It's awesome.
another perfect ending to the season.
I know. I was like,
thought.
I want to talk about this. I was like, okay, Sherry, it's an hour and a half. Okay, we
I
don't.
know. I'm still not. Even I still was like, I want to talk about more things too. And we went on all the tangents, and she's good with that because she loves going on tangents.
Yeah, I noticed. I love it. Her tangents are great, and she's so smart. You know what I mean?
So smart.
And she's so caring, and it's
Yeah.
it's got to be tough, being in that position to see athletes struggle with things and having to do the best game plan.
Totally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You do always have cool guests.
I mean, we try. We have a good social circle.
We do. But yeah, it's going to be our summer break. So what are you doing for your summer break?
So working on this competition and hopefully going to Nashville in July, hanging out with you. So we're doing the Red Stars on Saturday. So we're going to have to do some posts about that. We're actually going to be together live. And just enjoying myself, I guess. Oh, and then getting ready for Italy in September.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yes, ladies, not we.
Yeah.
I get that. I get it. You guys.
Politically correct.
You guys. We're so Midwestern. You guys.
I know. Exactly. I always do that. What about you? What do you do? Are you going to try to get in a couple races or something this summer?
Yeah. So I am going to Europe later this month, but I am next month. So I'm not racing this Sunday. That was originally supposed to be my first race back.
Right.
I'm going to be pushed it out. I'm doing Michigan Sprint in July.
Oh, nice.
And then the next weekend after that, I'll do a DECA Fit, but team only. When I do back-to-back weekends, the second one always sucks.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to run this. I feel like that should be good.
Yeah.
So that's my July. I got 2 comps in July. And
yay. Well, cool. And then we'll have to maybe come back August. And do something for the Olympics, because the Olympics are at the end of July.
That's what I'm like. We have to at least come back to just do a couple of Olympic specials.
Yeah, I agree.
I am so excited, obviously for track, but gymnastics.
Yeah, there's so many things.
Like soccer, women's soccer. But I mean, so many. There's a female wrestler from Chicago.
Oh, that's right. I heard about that.
So many women that we're going to see. So many sports
I'm excited.
That we're going to be able to just be a part of. And I just absolutely love the swimming. Swimming's pretty cool too.
That was exciting.
The track and the field.
The tracks and the field. Yep.
But yeah, on that note,
this has been a Chicago Clubhouse Network production.
Bye.
Bye.